Once, every Aussie home relied on outdoor laundries, backyard dunnies, and chores that made comfort a luxury. In just one generation, these features vanished, changing family life forever. But what did we lose when these 10 iconic elements disappeared? And why do so few remember what life was really like before? On Monday mornings, the sound of a copper lid clanging and the sharp scent of soap let everyone know it was wash day. For decades, Australian families relied on outside laundries, simple sheds or lean-tos tucked behind the house, open to the weather and thick with steam. Inside, a concrete trough stood beside a heavy copper boiler, with firewood stacked underneath. The copper had to be filled by the bucket, then lit early, long before the sun warmed the yard. Dorothy, now in her 80s, remembers rising before dawn to get the fire going. Everything stank of soap and steam on wash days, even the chickens, she laughs. Clothes were boiled, poked with a wooden stick, then hauled out with tongs and fed through a hand-cranked wringer. The wringer pressed out water, but left red marks on your knuckles if you weren't careful. All this effort kept the mess, heat and risk of fire well away from the main house. By the 1960s and 70s, automatic washing machines finally brought this chore indoors. Old laundry sheds now sit empty or serve as storage, a quiet reminder of the hard work and practical design that shaped daily life. Out the back, behind the veggie patch and the chook shed, stood the outdoor dunny, a corrugated iron or weatherboard box perched over a pan. Each week, before sunrise, the night soil man would slip quietly through back gates, swapping out full cans and leaving behind a fresh one. Stan Carter, known around Sydney as Stan the Pan Man, remembered darting between yards in the dark, dodging barking dogs and the odd practical joke left by cheeky householders. Kids dared each other to peek inside, but most were scared off by redback spiders, or the thought of stumbling down the path with a torch on a freezing night. Toilet paper was whatever you could find, torn up newspaper or pages from an old phone book hung on a nail. In summer, the seat burned your legs. In winter, the wind whistled through the cracks. City sewerage rolled out in the 1960s and 70s, but in country towns, the dunny and its weekly ritual lingered into the 1980s. For all its discomfort, the dunny run became a source of backyard gossip, neighbourly banter, and a fair share of Aussie humour. Tucked into the kitchen or laundry wall, the built-in ironing cupboard was the secret weapon of the tidy Aussie home from the 1940s through to the 70s. With a quick pull, the board folded down and locked into place, ready for hours of smoothing sheets, uniforms, and tea towels. Most cupboards had just enough space for the iron, a cake of velvet soap, and a bottle of spray starch. Everything needed for a marathon session. Some even had a power point or a tiny light wired inside, a small luxury when ironing dragged into the evening. Bev, now in her 60s, remembers her mum's routine. Board down, radio on, the sound of the ABC crackling through the house as steam rose and shirts piled up. Back then, every bit of linen was pressed crisp before school or work, but as drip-dry and permanent press fabrics took over in the 1970s, the weekly ironing marathon faded. Today, these cupboards are rare finds, glimpsed in old Queenslanders or weatherboard cottages, reminders of a time when domestic order was measured by the neatness of a linen press. In the sticky heat of a Queensland summer, sleep-outs and veranda bedrooms offered a simple escape. Families would line up beds along the veranda, louved windows cranked open to catch the faintest hint of a breeze. Mosquitoes were kept at bay by fly-wire screens, and furniture was kept to a minimum. Just a bed, a thin blanket, and maybe a battered suitcase in the corner. John, who grew up in Townsville, remembers waking to the first burst of bird calls and the distant rattle of the milk truck. You copped the cold in winter and the noise from the street, but nothing beat those cool mornings after a scorcher, he says. For many, sleep-outs weren't just for summer. As families grew, teenage boys or visiting relatives often bunked down on the veranda year-round. These spaces were designed for cross-ventilation, making the most of the Aussie climate long before air conditioning was common. By the late 1970s, reverse-cycle aircon made indoor bedrooms more comfortable, and sleep-outs slowly disappeared. Today, those breezy verandas are more likely to be home offices or media rooms, but the memory of waking up with the sun and the sound of magpies lingers on. Before the hum of a Kelvinator fridge, families relied on the humble meat safe to keep food fresh. Usually perched on the back veranda or under the eaves, these cupboards were made from timber or tin, their sides punched with tiny holes or covered in wire mesh. The design was simple but clever. Air could flow through to cool the contents, but blowflies and other pests were kept out. To stop ants from raiding the leftovers, each leg of the safe sat in a tin of water or kerosene. On hot days, a slab of meat or a wedge of cheese might last just long enough for dinner, provided the Iceman hadn't missed his round. Shoppers visited the butcher or corner shop daily, bringing home only what could be eaten before it spoiled. Some meat safes were plain, others boasted pressed metal or carved wood. A touch of pride in a practical world. Retired butcher Tom recalls the telltale smell of a safe that hadn't been cleaned. You'd never forget it, and neither would the flies. By the late 1950s and 60s, electric fridges swept through Australian kitchens and meat safes were pushed aside. Today, they're prized at antique markets, reminders of the daily ingenuity and effort that once defined life at home. A wood-fired Metters stove was the heart of many Aussie kitchens, chugging away from dawn to dusk. Lighting it meant splitting kindling, stacking hardwood, and striking a match before most of the house had even stirred. The fire needed constant tending, too much wood and the oven smoked, too little and dinner went cold. Ethel from Dubbo remembers her mother's warning: never use offcuts full of sap or you'd have sparks flying and a scolding to match. Ash had to be cleared every morning, and every evening the embers were banked with heavy logs to keep a gentle heat for the next day's breakfast. Bath time brought out the chip heater, a narrow, upright tank in the bathroom corner. Lighting it was a job for steady hands, a handful of chips and twigs, a careful touch with a match, then a nervous wait as water began to heat. Too slow, and the bath was lukewarm. Too fast, and scalding water spat from the tap. Burns and chimney fires weren't rare, and the job often fell to the women of the house. In the 1950s and 60s, electric and gas stoves swept through the suburbs, promising instant hot water and meals without the mess. But in country towns, wood stoves and chip heaters kept going well into the 1980s, a stubborn, smoky reminder of the skill and effort it once took just to put dinner on the table or fill a bath. Pressed tin ceilings once shimmered above the best rooms of Federation and Victorian-era homes, their embossed metal panels catching the light with sunbursts, native flowers, and Art Deco patterns. From the 1890s through the 1940s, these ceilings were prized for their beauty and their practicality. They resisted fire, shrugged off the heat, and cost less than intricate plaster. For decades, the gentle tap of a broomstick on tin signaled a Saturday clean, the sound echoing down hallways. But after the war, tastes changed. Builders ripped out pressed metal in favor of plain fibro and plasterboard, and ornate panels piled up in demolition yards. By the 1980s, heritage activists and antique hunters scrambled to save what they could, sometimes clashing with developers over every last sheet. Today, original pressed tin adds thousands to a home's value, and restorers hunt for salvaged panels, proof that what was once considered daggy can become a treasure worth fighting for. Before sunrise, the sharp clang of the telegram bell could freeze a household mid-step. Most homes had a brass slot set into the front door, letters landing with a thud on the hallway tiles, kids scrambling to grab the mail before breakfast. But the telegram bell was different. Gladys, now in her 80s, still remembers the dread. When that bell rang after dark, your heart just stopped. You prayed it wasn't bad news from the front. During wartime and family emergencies, that single, urgent ring carried a weight no email ever will. By the late 1970s, security fears saw letter slots replaced with locked boxes out by the fence. Telegrams faded as phones and emails took over, leaving only the memory of those sounds, once a daily ritual, now vanished from modern homes. A front fence once marked the line between public and private, each home with its own gate, latch, and a ritual for visitors. Unlatch, walk the path, knock at the door. Agapanthus or clipped roses often edged the way, gardens on display, and the fence itself a statement, white pickets, wrought iron, or neat colour bond. In the 1970s and 80s, councils, convinced open streets made friendlier suburbs, urged residents to lower or remove fences. New estates banned high fences entirely, planners praising the open look in council newsletters. Some grumbled about lost privacy, but the trend stuck. Now, double garages and driveways dominate, front gardens hidden from view. Inside, another boundary faded. Servant bells, once wired to indicator boards in kitchens or halls, were standard in homes with housemaids, cooks, or nannies. A pull on a cord sent a bell jangling and a numbered flag dropping, telling staff where to go. Contracts from the 1930s specified twice daily bell calls from the morning room, no more than 70 per week. By the 1960s, live-in staff were rare, bellboards silent. A few remain as curios in old Toorak or Mossman mansions, reminders of a time when fences and bells quietly enforced the lines between people, roles, and the world outside. By the 1970s, features like outside laundries, pan toilets, and meat safes had almost disappeared from new Australian homes, replaced by indoor plumbing, electric appliances, and modern materials. Archival photos and council records confirm that even iconic elements such as pressed tin ceilings and front fence gates were often removed as building codes and lifestyles changed. Yet, some questions remain, like how many original servant bell systems have survived in private homes, with heritage listings offering only partial answers. The evidence shows these changes were driven by technology, public health policy, and a move toward open-plan, car-focused suburbs. What endures is the record of everyday adaptation. From Dorothy's wash day to Gladys's telegram bell, these vanished features chart a shift from hard yakka and ritual to convenience and privacy. Today, the traces of this past remain in heritage renovations, collectibles, and family memories, tangible proof of how swiftly Australian home life can transform.